Liz Miller and I were in the same high school. I remembered her, but she didn't remember me. She grew up fast, with broad shoulders, a tiny waist, narrow hips, and was tall. She was naturally good at sports. I grew up late, finishing high school at 5 and 8, with a small chest, thin legs, and weighing 140 pounds. She loved how she looked and really cared about appearing attractive. Every day to school, I just wore jeans and a too large t-shirt, which made my chest look even smaller. At the beginning of each school year, all the girls looked forward to seeing Elizabeth's outfit because it set the fashion trend for that year. No one even noticed me at school. Elizabeth was amazing at tennis, having started lessons when she was 10. Her height and build gave her extra strength and endurance compared to smaller girls. In gym class, I was always the last one picked for teams, but I made up for what I lacked with a lot of hard work and determination. Long-distance running was an individual sport. Since it didn't involve physical contact, I chose it as my activity and turned out to be pretty good at it. Elizabeth had a busy social life filled with dates with popular guys, wealthy individuals, star athletes, and college fraternity members. Meanwhile, my schedule remained pretty empty throughout all 4 years of high school. I preferred spending my time tinkering with electronic gadgets and computers in the garage. While Elizabeth got a new car every fall to drive to school, I relied on my bike for transportation during all 4 years. During classes, Elizabeth was often engaged in conversations with boys. Despite us being in the same class and sitting near each other due to our last names, she only spoke to me once in 4 years. It was during a test when she handed me the paper and simply said, "Here." Her father owned Miller Manufacturing, a local company with a long-standing history of profitability. The business, started by her grandfather and now run by her father, employed 160 townspeople, including my father, who worked as a machinist at the plant since returning from the Army. After high school, I pursued a college education to become an industrial engineer, while Elizabeth received a full scholarship to a prestigious school for her talent in tennis, which often made headlines in our local newspaper. During my freshman and sophomore years of college, I experienced a growth spurt, adding 6 inches to my height and 50 pounds of muscle from my running routine. With a surge in testosterone, my physical attributes, including my tool size, also increased. As a straight-A student, physically fit, and endowed young man, I entered my junior year with confidence. During my junior year's Christmas break, I went home to visit my parents. One evening, I attended a party hosted by one of my classmates where Elizabeth, looking stunning but heavily intoxicated, was present. Her boyfriend, also drunk, was making disrespectful comments about her. Fed up, she slapped him hard and declared she was leaving, instructing me to take her home, since I was the only sober person there. As the sunlight filtered through the bedroom window, I slowly woke up from a daze. Elizabeth was still asleep beside me, but I sensed some movement. She groaned and grabbed my arm. Suddenly, she tensed, realizing something was wrong. Turning to face me, she bombarded me with questions, her volume rising with each one. She jumped out of bed, glaring at me fiercely, demanding to know who I was and why I was in her bed. Thinking quickly to prevent the situation from escalating, I stood up and faced her boldly, explaining that I was the one she asked to take her home while she was drunk. I recounted how I prevented her from getting into a cab that could have taken advantage of her, how I helped her when she was sick, and how I stayed with her to ensure her safety throughout the night. I emphasized that I did not take advantage of her in her vulnerable state. After laying out the events of the previous night, I understood her confusion, given her lack of memory. Although her stance remained unchanged, her angry expression softened. She quietly admitted, "I must have really overdone it last night. I have some fragmented memories, but nothing coherent. Do I know you?" "You know me, but you don't remember me. My name is Jeff Mullen, and we sat next to each other in most of our high school classes. I was the skinny guy in jeans and a t-shirt, total geek." Elizabeth remarked, "You've got to be kidding me. I do remember you always getting better grades than me. I may have borrowed a few answers from you on some tests." I confessed, "Honestly, I purposely made my tests visible to you. I was too shy to talk to you, and I hoped you might start a conversation because I couldn't bring myself to." We both chuckled at that, and the tension of waking up together eased. I suggested, "Now that you know I'm not a serial killer, can I make you some toast and black coffee to counteract the effects of last night's heavy drinking?" She smiled and replied, "Yes, please." As I headed to the kitchen, I glanced at Elizabeth in the mirror on the wall, noticing she was checking me out too, with a slight smile and nod. While the coffee brewed, I toasted some bread and spread butter, and a generous amount of grape jelly on it for a quick energy boost. I found a small white apron on the kitchen counter and put it on. Balancing a plate and a coffee cup, I returned to the bedroom, eliciting a hearty laugh from Elizabeth. She found my attempt at modesty amusing as I placed the coffee and plate on the nightstand. "This toast is loaded with jelly," she remarked. "Could you bring me a napkin? I'm probably going to make a mess." I grinned and remarked, "No need for a napkin. Grape jelly is my absolute favorite. I can't get enough of it." With a smile still on my face, I headed back to the kitchen to grab my coffee. When I returned, I found grape jelly scattered everywhere. She smiled sheepishly and admitted, "Oops, looks like I made a mess." I understood that some guys could be selfish, prioritizing their own pleasure over their partner's, but that wasn't my style. Sure, I didn't mind, especially since I did a lot of long-distance running, which requires focus. After we showered together, we found a dry spot on the sheets and just relaxed, holding each other close. Curious, I asked her why she was staying at Carol's instead of with her parents. In a hushed tone, she replied, "It's complicated, family dynamics and all. I don't really get along well with my brothers." I quickly changed the subject, asking, "What's on your agenda for later today?" Her expression softened, and she answered, "I'll be running pre-Christmas errands in the morning, and I have a tennis match at 2 p.m. "But there's a foot of snow outside. How are you going to play tennis?" I inquired.
"We have an indoor tennis court at the country club, Jeff."
She clarified. Life seemed to be going smoothly for me. I had a job interview scheduled for 1 p.m., and interestingly enough, it was with Robert Miller, president and chairman of the board of Miller Manufacturing, Inc. It was quite a coincidence, considering I had just spent the morning with his daughter, and I planned to spend more time with her that evening. The last time I wore a suit was at my high school graduation, so I had bought a new one last week, specifically for this meeting. Regardless of what had happened between Elizabeth and me that morning, I felt both nervous and excited about the interview. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door to the Miller Manufacturing corporate office and greeted my cousin Sally. My mother and Sally's mother were sisters, with Sally being 5 years older than me. Sally greeted me with a smile and directed me to take a seat while she informed Mr. Miller of my arrival. Giving Sally a playful wink, I confidently entered an office adorned with wood paneling, likely sourced from a small oak forest. Mr. Miller rose to greet me, offering a firm handshake and motioning for me to sit in one of the plush chairs beneath portraits of himself and his father. Curious, Mr. Miller inquired about the purpose of our meeting. I explained, "I'm a junior at State University seeking a summer internship, and Miller Manufacturing is my top choice." He questioned my preference for Miller Manufacturing, suggesting there were other prestigious companies available to someone like me. I responded, "Sir, this town is my roots. My family's been here for generations, and my father has been part of this company since returning from the Army. I've always admired the work done here, ever since I was a kid coming in with my dad. I've inherited a solid industrial knowledge from him. While many grads aim for big cities like Chicago or Dallas, I want to stay here and contribute to your company. I understand I need to prove myself, but I'm willing to put in the effort. My goal is to intern with you this summer and hopefully secure a full-time position next year." Then, Mr. Miller brought up his daughter, Elizabeth. I knew I needed to tread carefully. With a gulp, I replied, "I knew of your daughter in high school, but we didn't run in the same circles." Mr. Miller seemed to recall the string of boys who had visited his home over the years. He then asked, "What can you offer me this summer, Jeff?" I assured him, "Sir, I'm willing to start from the bottom, doing tasks like sweeping floors and taking out the trash. In fact, I studied a case on your company during my industrial efficiency class this summer." My statement piqued his interest, prompting him to lean forward and encourage me to continue. At Miller Manufacturing, production halts daily at 4 p.m. for machine cleaning, floor sweeping, and restocking materials. Currently, our highest-paid employees handle janitorial duties, costing $12 per hour compared to their usual $50 per hour. My proposal is to have machinists work until 5 p.m. and then leave the premises. Lower-paid staff, including janitors and summer interns, would complete the remaining tasks. It's crucial to adjust the hours of lower-paid workers to avoid exceeding 40 hours per week, even if they stay after 5 p.m. Jeff, could you provide me with a copy of your analysis? Absolutely, sir. Although I haven't copyrighted it yet, eliciting a chuckle. What will it cost to have your expertise this summer, Jeff? My suggestion, Mr. Miller, is for you to determine the initial price, starting at the state minimum wage, and allow me to earn any increases. You've convinced me that we need fresh perspectives. Let's plan for you to be our first summer intern next June. Should I send you a contract? No, sir, I replied. A handshake is all I need. With that, I exited his office, sharing a wink with Sally on my way out. Feeling euphoric, I headed to the country club to watch Elizabeth's tennis lesson, buoyed by my newfound success. Inside, I could hear an intense match underway. I found a quiet spot and admired Elizabeth's skill and determination as she played. She exhibited power, speed, grace, and fierce competitiveness, leaving nothing to chance on the court. I felt proud to have started a connection with her. When she finished her set and came for a break, she spotted me. Surprised to see her recognize me in a suit, she called me over, gave me a kiss, and thanked me for showing interest in her tennis. "Elizabeth, you've been expending a lot of energy. Can I treat you to dinner and help replenish your carbs?" "Sure thing, Jeff. Pick me up at the apartment at 6:30, okay?" "I'll be there," I said, flashing a grin. We went to Leonie's for pizza and beer, spending the time getting to know each other. Elizabeth is easy to talk to. Just ask her about herself and you're set for the evening. She's quite talkative and has some fascinating stories. Tennis is her passion, and she dreams of turning it into a career, first as a pro player and later as a coach. She was genuinely impressed that I came to watch her practice. Most of her previous boyfriends only cared about one thing: bedroom activities. She appreciated my interest in her life beyond that. When I asked about her family, she seemed hesitant to dwell on the topic. She has two older brothers who work at Miller Manufacturing, but she's not fond of either of them. According to her, one's a sleazy salesman and the other's a timid bookkeeper. Her dad's a decent guy, but he's always been busy working. Her mom, however, is a real piece of work, making life miserable for everyone. Hence her dad's long hours at the plant. After spending over an hour discussing her, she asked me why I showed up to her tennis match in a suit, questioning if I knew anything about tennis. I explained that while I do play, it's not at her level. I was simply interested in seeing what she liked. As for the suit, I had an interview earlier that day for a summer internship, hopefully leading to a full-time job after graduation. I had scheduled it last month, knowing I'd be home for Christmas. "How'd the interview go?" she inquired. "Fantastic. I landed the summer internship starting in June with hopes of securing a full-time position upon graduation. Then came the moment I feared." "Which company?" she asked. With caution, I revealed that I had met with the president of Miller Manufacturing.
What?
She exploded.
You did what? You met with my father?
Before I could explain, she unleashed a barrage of accusations. I had to intervene, firmly telling her to sit down and explaining the timing of the appointment. I emphasized that I wasn't using her to get to her dad. I asked her to take a moment to process it all and pleaded with her not to let this coincidence ruin our evening. The intensity in her eyes could have sliced me in two, like one of the plant's plasma cutters. She sat there, taking deep breaths as if she'd just lost a tennis set. Finally, she spoke up. "I get it, but still, what are the odds of you showing up out of nowhere the day before your appointment with my dad? And on the same day we start seeing each other? Pretty slim chances, right? Did my name come up in your conversation with him?" I confirmed. "Yes, it did." She rolled her eyes and shot me that intense glare again. "And? Your dad asked if we were in the same class and if I knew you. I mentioned we were in the same class but didn't hang out together. That's about it. He mentioned I didn't seem like the typical guys who came over to see you. I wanted to give you a heads up before your dad brings up his new summer intern. Didn't want you to be caught off guard." "I appreciate that, Jeff. It was considerate of you to let me know beforehand. But what does this mean for us dating?" I held her hand and explained. "I genuinely enjoy spending time with you. You're the most fascinating person I've been with. I really want us to keep moving forward. Working temporarily for your dad this summer isn't a big deal. Heck, he might even fire me on the first day. Let's just see where things take us. Are you okay with that?" She smiled and agreed. "You're focused on your industrial engineering goal, and I'm focused on tennis. We might go our separate ways eventually, but for now, let's just enjoy being together. Speaking of which, let's head back to the apartment." But alas, all good things come to an end. Elizabeth had a tear in her eye as we both had to head back to school. We kept in touch daily, initially through phone calls and then emails. We even exchanged Valentine's Day cards with expressions of love. June 1st marked my first day at Miller Manufacturing as their summer intern, the company's very first one. Work was enjoyable. Learning how the parts were made and the engineering behind each product was fascinating. The guys at the plant treated me well, appreciating my interest in their work. Having my dad as a department head surely didn't hurt either. Mr. Miller agreed to my suggestion of having lower-level workers clean the shop at the end of the day instead of the main-line workers. One day in mid-June, as I was sweeping the floor near closing time, I heard a female voice say, "A janitor, my boyfriend is a janitor." Oh my God, how embarrassing for me. I turned around to find a stunning Elizabeth in a colorful sundress, looking amazing. I moved to hug her, but she pushed me back, saying, "I don't hug dirty janitors. Maybe I'd hug a clean, bright young intern if he's willing to take me out to dinner." I replied, "I'll make sure a clean, bright intern meets you wherever and whenever you say." 6 p.m. at my parents' house. Let's see if he can find his way around the nicer part of town. If not, I'm leaving at 6:05, she said. I'll pass that along, I assured her. With that, she turned so fast that her dress flew up, showing off her tan, muscular legs. The guys in the shop laughed at the scene. I knew I wouldn't live this down. My car pulled into the Miller home driveway at 5:45 p.m. I wasn't going to be late to meet Elizabeth. She saw me arrive but didn't open the door. Fine, I thought. At 5:55 p.m., I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Thankfully, I was dressed in nice khaki slacks and my best dress shirt. A well-dressed woman answered the door and asked, "May I help you?" "Yes, ma'am, I'm Jeffrey Mullen here to see Miss Elizabeth Miller," I replied. With a slight grin, she said, "Yes, Mr. Mullen, Miss Elizabeth is expecting you. Please have a seat." Exactly at 6 o'clock, Elizabeth came downstairs, smiled at me, and remarked, "I thought you wouldn't show up. The janitor usually doesn't come to the chairman of the board's front door." "You're right, janitors don't, but the first ever summer intern does," I said. "Shall I introduce you to my parents?" Elizabeth asked. "I'd be delighted," I replied. Elizabeth led me to the family room where her father was reading and her mother was watching TV. "Father, Mother, I'd like you to meet my date for the evening, Mr. Jeffrey Mullen," Elizabeth announced. I greeted Mr. Miller with a nod and said, "Good evening, sir." He smiled back and greeted me warmly. Then I turned to her mother and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Miller." To which she sneered, "This is your janitor friend? Surely you could find someone with higher expectations." Elizabeth quickly replied, "Oh, Mother, I believe Jeffrey has high expectations, so much so that you needn't wait up for me tonight." I felt like I was about to sink through the floor. Why was she putting me on the spot like this? It was totally unexpected. Elizabeth took my arm gently and whispered, "Come on, Jeffrey. It's been a while since I've seen you." I turned to the surprised couple and said, "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Miller. Good night, sir." Mrs. Miller just harumphed, while Mr. Miller smirked and said, 7:30 tomorrow morning, right, Jeff?" I replied, "Yes, sir." Elizabeth was laughing so hard she could barely catch her breath as we got into the car. I was shocked, unsure whether to be angry, embarrassed, or just laugh along. I asked her, "What was that all about? Why did you do that to me? Why did you do that to them? I just don't get what the point of all that was." Between laughs, Elizabeth explained, "It was a demonstration to my mother of why we're together. Your quick wit and ability to handle yourself in any situation. Like tonight when you were thrown to the wolves with Mrs. Miller. You remained cool, calm, and collected. I couldn't have scripted your response any better, from Marjorie at the door to Mother's reaction. You handled it perfectly. I'm glad that pleases you, Elizabeth. I enjoy our time together, whether it's in or out of bed. But I'm concerned about my job tomorrow. How will your father react to your bold antics? My job is important to me, just as your tennis is to you. Could you please consider my feelings and aspirations? What's important to you matters to me. Can I get the same consideration from you?" Elizabeth replied, "I'm used to getting my way, Jeff, but I'll try to think about your feelings before I cause you any trouble." Changing the subject, I asked, "I haven't heard from you in a couple of weeks. What's been going on?" "Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Does that answer your question?" she teased. "I've definitely missed you these past few months, Elizabeth." "I'm glad to hear that, Jeff. It makes me feel valued by you." Once we were seated at the town's best steakhouse, I proposed a toast to Elizabeth being in town and making it more beautiful. After a sip of red wine, I asked, "How long will you be in town and why did you stop by without contacting me?" "It was an unplanned trip. Father needed me to sign some corporate papers because I'm on the board of Miller Manufacturing. Remember, as you try to impress me tonight, I'm also your boss at Miller Manufacturing. It would be a shame for me to give you a poor performance on any references." Trying to feign surprise, I said, "Oh, really? I didn't know that." Elizabeth responded with a knowing smile, saying, "Like hell you didn't." I raised my glass, tapped hers, and smiled back. She knew that I had done my research and learned that Elizabeth, John, and Sam each had 30% of the stock, while several older workers had a combined 10%. Mr. Miller retained the voting rights to all their stock. because I had to be at work by 7:30 a.m., and Elizabeth didn't get much sleep last night. We didn't have a chance to talk or be intimate that morning. She flew out just before noon that day to work at tennis camps in Wisconsin for the summer. She did a mix of teaching, babysitting, housekeeping, and of course, playing lots of tennis. We kept in touch through letters, phone calls, and emails, but we didn't see each other until Christmas. She had her life, and I had mine. The rest of my summer was all about learning the precision parts manufacturing business. Miller Manufacturing had been in the industry for a long time and had a solid client list, especially in the aircraft business. They had significant contracts with Boeing, Spirit Aerosystems, and Cessna. John Miller, the head of marketing at Miller Manufacturing, was the eldest son of Robert Miller and Elizabeth's older brother. He saw me as a major annoyance, especially after learning I was Elizabeth's boyfriend. He made a point to disrespect his sister, referring to her as the bossy sister, witch on heels, or simply bossy. Despite being 8 years older than Elizabeth, she took pleasure in getting under his skin whenever she could, according to Robert. John didn't know much about marketing precision manufactured parts. He stuck to the outdated salesman tactics of the 60s and 70s. Get them drunk, get them laid, then get them signed. Despite knowledgeable order buyers going directly to the shop foreman for parts and specifications, John spent company funds on drinking and partying in the company's name. Robert tolerated it because John was family, and he believed John, his wife, and kids would struggle if he had to work elsewhere. The middle brother, Sam, was a sad case. He was quiet, difficult to communicate with, and completely incompetent in his role as material procurement manager. Sometimes the entire plant had to shut down because Sam failed to order the right materials for manufacturing. Outside of work, he spent his time drinking and fishing, and his attendance at work was inconsistent. According to John, Sam claimed he was offended by Bossy and lacked the strength to stand up to her. Bossy allegedly broke him after catching him doing things in the bathroom with a muscle magazine that concealed a Playboy magazine. She spread rumors that it was a not straight magazine, and Sam couldn't refute it. He was unmarried and kept to himself. Using my curious nature, I stumbled upon new techniques and products for Miller Manufacturing. Just tinkering around, I came up with a faster way to release farm equipment from tractors. Excited, I shared my idea with Dad and mentioned bringing it to Robert's attention. Dad warned me, saying, "Don't bother. Robert will pass it on to John, who'll likely laugh it off and toss it aside. Even if Robert asks John about it, John will just pass it on to Sam to figure out the costs, and it'll end up going nowhere. Many workers here have good ideas that never see the light of day." I considered patenting it myself for the company, but I knew it would meet the same fate. Since one of my college classes focused on patents, I decided to go solo. I formed Mullen Marketing LLC using my spare time to build and test the prototype. I sought out a patent attorney through Craig, a local lawyer I knew. By the end of summer, I had filed 4 patent applications. During this time, Elizabeth and I stayed in touch through emails and calls. Her world was all about tennis, while mine was centered on engineering. We managed to spend a night together during Christmas when Robert took the family on a trip to Naples, Florida. It was a sweet reunion filled with intimacy, conversations about the future, and a rekindled spark between us. While preparing for my final college exams, my attorney called with news about my patents. "Would you take $250,000 for your quick-release patent?" "Absolutely," I exclaimed. He explained that I could also negotiate for a $1 per unit royalty for 10 years, potentially earning more. He warned me to keep it quiet, knowing John Miller might try to interfere. He suggested depositing the money into Mullen Marketing discreetly. He also presented me with another opportunity, a foreclosed home the bank wanted to sell. Despite needing cosmetic work, it was structurally sound. With some of the patent money as a down payment, I became a homeowner. Robert Miller and I struck a deal for me to become a full-time employee at Miller Manufacturing as the chief engineering officer. While the salary wasn't as high as some of my classmates, I saw great potential for success in this position. Being young and driven, I put in a solid 45-hour work week and then focused on renovating my new home. There was no time for leisure activities like parties, golfing, or dating. I did my best to stay in touch with Elizabeth, but she was busy with her tennis tour, making it hard to reach her. One day, she unexpectedly dropped by while I was painting the living room. The house was in disarray with drop cloths everywhere. Her first words were, "What kind of mess are you making here?" I retorted, "I'm aiming for more of a Love Shack vibe than a mess." Her response was harsh, criticizing my taste and calling the place embarrassing. She suggested I hire someone to finish the remodeling quickly. I reminded her of my job responsibilities and the pressure from board members. In the end, I obliged her request to get a room at the Hyatt, and we enjoyed our time together that evening. Elizabeth had a habit of showing up unannounced between tennis tournaments during the summer. We'd spend time together before she disappeared again for weeks. Once, while doing laundry at my place, she accidentally spilled a package of protection from her suitcase. She brushed it off, saying, "Better safe than sorry." I wanted to be upset, but I knew we weren't committed, so I let it go. Sometimes I accompanied her to tournaments when it was convenient. During one of these trips, I noticed other guys approaching her, but she dismissed them. It seemed like if I weren't there, she'd be socializing more. Despite the distance, we kept our relationship going until the tennis tours ended. My job was going really well. I introduced several new procedures that made the plant run more smoothly and boosted profits. As I delved deeper into our products, I kept coming up with more ideas for patents. By the end of the first year, I had saved up quite a bit of money. This setup benefited Miller Manufacturing, since I paid the standard labor rate for our staff working on my projects and paid full price for materials and supplies. When I marketed these patents, I made sure the initial manufacturing run was done at Miller Manufacturing. In fact, I was bringing in more new business than our marketing director. When Elizabeth visited next, my house was far from being a mess. She was stressed from the road and decided to leave her dad's medical plan, needing more downtime without losing her winnings. She didn't want to stay with her parents, so I came up with an idea. I proposed marriage to her, suggesting that she could have health benefits, relax in a peaceful setting, and be with someone who cared about her. To my surprise, she accepted. Planning the wedding turned into chaos. Elizabeth and her mother clashed fiercely over the type of wedding they wanted. Her mother preferred a high society affair, while Elizabeth wanted a more casual event with tennis players and sorority sisters. During a meeting, they argued nonstop, ignoring my mother's suggestions. Mrs. Miller still referred to me as the janitor boy. In the end, we eloped to Las Vegas, and despite the drama, we were overjoyed. Life was great for a couple of years while Elizabeth continued her tennis tour. Although she wasn't earning much, she received generous dividends from her Miller Manufacturing stock. When I jokingly asked for a share, she threatened to have me fired or demoted back to janitor. A few months later, she called me in tears and shouting. I couldn't make out what she was saying. When I asked if I should come over, she said yes, so I hopped on a flight that same night. When I arrived at her hotel room, I found her with her right leg raised and an ice pack on it. It seemed like she might have either torn or stretched her ACL. We decided it was best to seek medical attention back home rather than on the road. Our doctor thought her ACL might be stretched, not torn, but an MRI was needed to confirm. During the prep for the MRI, the nurse asked if she could be pregnant. Elizabeth replied, "No, I'm on birth control." The nurse insisted on a pregnancy test for women of her age before the MRI. When Elizabeth came out of the bathroom, she looked pale. "This can't be right. I'm not pregnant. I can't be. I'm on birth control, and we use protection." She stopped mid-sentence. What did she mean by "we use protection" when she's not with me? I needed to tread carefully here. The nurse tried another pregnancy test, but the results were the same. Elizabeth was devastated. "Please, not now, not me," she sobbed. I tried to reassure her that everything would be okay, especially since she would need almost a year to recover before she could return to competitive tennis. Despite her injury, Elizabeth found a job as the girls' high school tennis coach. While she couldn't play, she excelled in teaching the girls' tennis strategy beyond just hitting the ball back. Her team even won the state meet in their class. She used the school's athletic equipment to rehab and strengthen her knee. Saying that Elizabeth wasn't thrilled about being pregnant would be an understatement. As her belly grew, so did her complaints. She found fault with everything. Her breasts got larger, and when I asked if she planned to breastfeed, she scoffed, saying, "No way, these award-winning watermelons will just turn into empty sacks hanging down." Her delivery didn't go smoothly, and she was in labor for quite a while. I was there in the delivery room when the nurse announced, "You're the proud mother of 2 baby boys." In her medicine-induced haze, she asked, "Are they black? Are they black? They can't be black." "No, they're white," the nurse replied, a bit irritated. Once again, doubts about her fidelity arose, but there was no proof yet. While still in the hospital, she asked the doctor to perform a tubal ligation so she couldn't get pregnant again. I suggested it would be easier for me to get a vasectomy, but she insisted on having her tubes tied. It occurred to me that if I got a vasectomy, she could still get pregnant by someone else. Maybe her desire for sterilization wasn't about me, but about her own intentions. When we brought Cameron and Cody home, my mother and grandmother were there to help. Elizabeth lacked maternal skills, so she welcomed their assistance. My grandmother, a lively 70-year-old, adored babies and spent most days at our house from 8 to 5 for the first 2 months. Elizabeth was thrilled to have her own personal nanny. She continued with physical therapy to rehab her knee and prepare for competitive tennis. After a year, my mother retired from teaching to become a full-time babysitter for us. Elizabeth was back on her feet and playing tennis again. With her mobility restored, Elizabeth immersed herself in tennis matches, tournaments, clinics, and symposiums. After all, she was wealthy, unemployed, and had others to take care of her family duties. Considering my existing doubts about her fidelity, I hired a private investigator to track her car's location and record audio. They also hacked into her cell phone to monitor texts and emails. It was expensive, but so is a divorce. Her attitude didn't get any better, and she found fault with everything in our house. From the paint colors to the closet space, nothing seemed to meet her standards. Even my family heirlooms were banished to storage, as if anything connected to me wasn't good enough for her home. I tried to pitch in with household chores, but I just ended up irritating her more. Every task, from folding towels to taking out the trash, was met with criticism and belittlement. No matter what I did, she couldn't be pleased. Once my mother left for the day, taking care of the boys became my only source of happiness at home. Living in a middle-class neighborhood wasn't to her liking. She felt superior to everyone there, especially with her generous dividends from Miller. She spent extravagantly, even joining the country club. While she lunched there daily, I worried about our neglected children. Our once passionate bed life dwindled to almost nothing. The evidence for divorce was mounting, but escaping seemed impossible. She had me trapped, knowing I couldn't bear to leave the boys or risk losing my job at Miller Manufacturing, where she held ownership. Meanwhile, my private investigator uncovered her infidelity. I dreaded the thought of her coming home drunk and expecting intimacy, especially knowing she might still be carrying another man's DNA. At my investigator's suggestion, I bought a discreet toy to gather evidence of her affairs. Instead of cleaning it after use, I sent it to a lab to check for DNA markers left behind by someone else. My unexpected solution came from the real estate market. She decided we needed to upgrade to a multi-million-dollar home in the country club area, despite the hefty payments devouring her dividends. She was fixated on this house, perhaps because it surpassed her mother's in size and cost. Meanwhile, I was focused on acquiring pricey CNC machines through my LLC to lease to Miller. With Robert Miller gone, I practically ran the plant, with John mostly delegating responsibilities to me. I secured a new title as operational manager and negotiated a job description giving me autonomy, including authority to make equipment purchases up to $500,000 without board approval. Mullen Machine would buy the machines and lease them to Miller, addressing our pressing need to stay competitive. Despite Mullen Machine's profitability, I still needed a loan for the equipment due to necessary plant improvements reducing dividends. My banker revealed a roadblock. I couldn't secure the equipment loan if I was tied to the note for the new house. Likewise, she couldn't obtain a loan without demonstrating my income. Stuck in a deadlock, Craig proposed a post-nuptial agreement. The postnup resembled a friendly divorce settlement, wherein I relinquished all financial claims to her personal assets, including her Miller Manufacturing stock. I wouldn't be on the mansion's deed or loan, but I'd pay her rent monthly, equivalent to half the house payment, plus insurance and taxes. Craig strategically structured it to imply lifelong payments, mirroring a divorce settlement. Yet, in reality, it was temporary. This allowed me to expand Mullen Marketing LLC without hindrance. To her and her attorney, I seemed to possess only my modest LLC and personal belongings, making me appear financially inconsequential. However, unbeknownst to them, her company stock was depreciating, making it harder for her to meet financial obligations. She had inadvertently trapped herself in a financial bind, unaware of her dwindling assets. While arranging the postnup, I suspected her attorney might have been involved with her intimately or desired to be, hence letting her take the lead. She believed she knew it all and didn't require any guidance. With the asset split done, I turned my attention to John Miller's stock. He was drowning in debt from overspending on booze, drugs, fast cars, and women living beyond his means. His wife, Sherry, sensing trouble, reached out to me for help in curbing his spending. She feared their marriage was on the brink, one misstep away from divorce. Despite John's dismissive attitude, I assured him of my support and care, even offering assistance in the future. A month later, John found himself in a dire situation, arrested for DUI with pills. Desperate, he needed $1 million to escape the clutches of his debts and potential danger in jail. I offered him a loan against his stock, providing him a lifeline. In return, he signed over all his stock and voting rights to me, with the option to repurchase it within a year at the same price, no interest. His gratitude was immense, but his new venture into professional gambling ensured he wouldn't reclaim his stock in time. The bank used my Miller Manufacturing and LLC stocks as collateral for the loan. Craig drafted the agreement and praised me for gaining control of John's stock. With 40% ownership, including employee shares, I was close to having the majority. Sam Miller started assigning me more procurement tasks. Seeing his distress, I asked him what was troubling him. Sam explained he couldn't handle the pressure anymore, maxed out on antidepressants and feared a stroke. Grateful for my help to his brother, he confided in me. I assured Sam I'd assist him however I could. I asked him about his long-term goals. Sam expressed his desire to live peacefully in his secluded home, spending his days fishing and hunting without any stress, expectations, or drama. I asked if he was interested in selling his Miller Manufacturing stock to me. No, Sam replied. I've tried, but nobody wants to buy it, especially with John and Elizabeth controlling the stock. They'll likely mistreat minority shareholders like they do me. If I sold, I'd have to worry about investing wisely for my future. Instead, could you pay me a monthly amount for life in exchange for my stock? I can do that, Sam. How much do you need each month? Jeff, $10,000 would suffice for me to live comfortably. I can manage that, Sam. Let me handle the paperwork, and you can tidy up your office and resign. Thanks, Jeff. You're a great friend for helping me out. Craig was overjoyed when I mentioned the lifetime contract to pay Sam $10,000 monthly. He nearly yelled, Sam would need almost 50 years to get the full stock value. Plus, Sam's not well. He won't live 10 years. True, Craig, but he'll enjoy those 10 years with this setup. You, my friend, now fully control Miller Manufacturing. Congratulations, Craig exclaimed. Thanks, Craig. Your legal skills in drafting these agreements are invaluable. Eliza Witch doesn't control me or the boys anymore. It's time to turn the tables on her. Elizabeth didn't think much of my first house in town, even after I put in a lot of effort to fix it up. Instead of selling it, I kept it as a rental, but the last tenants moved out 5 months ago, which turned out to be fortunate for me and the boys. In early September, while Elizabeth was at the U.S. Open tennis tournament in New York, I moved our personal items from the mansion back to our old home without any trouble. By evening, the boys and I were settled in. They stopped asking about Mommy because she was hardly around, and when she was, she frightened them. Despite trying to reach her at inconvenient times when she might be with someone else, I either got her voicemail or a brief dismissal with no return calls. Once all our stuff was out of the mansion, I left a note for Elizabeth, informing her that I wouldn't be providing the September rent check since I had moved out. The next morning at the office, I had Sally send a 14-day notice to all stockholders for a meeting. We'd be discussing changes in stock ownership, leadership, and approving third-quarter dividends. Sally asked, There's a lot happening here that I don't know about. Can you fill me in, just in case someone asks? I've got exciting news, Sally. I now own all of John and Sam's Miller Manufacturing stock and control 70% of the voting rights. Elizabeth only has 30%, so she's irrelevant now. Sally was thrilled and said, I've hated that witch since she was in high school. When Elizabeth got back from New York and read my note about leaving her house, she flipped out. She called me yelling, You've got to pay that rent. I need it for my payments. If you don't cough up, I'll boost my dividends to cover it, and I'll make sure your paycheck takes the hit. You're messing up big time messing with the company owner. It was clear she hadn't talked to her brothers about their stock transfer, and I knew she hadn't bothered to read the notice for the upcoming stockholders meeting. At the meeting, it was just me, holding 60% of the stock. My dad, representing the employees' 10% share, Craig, the new corporate attorney, and Sally, the longtime board secretary. Elizabeth's 30% ownership wasn't represented. First, we approved the transfer of stock from John and Sam Miller to me. Second, I got promoted to president and chairman of the board. Third, we decided not to dish out any dividends due to lower earnings and increased equipment purchases. All motions passed with flying colors. Meeting over. As soon as my dad left, Elizabeth barged in with her lawyer, shouting, Get out of my father's chair, you jerk! You're fired, scram! Turns out her nosy lawyer heard rumors about ownership changes and called Elizabeth to check. That's when she finally read the notice about the stockholders meeting. Too bad for her, it was already done and dusted. She growled, Where are my brothers? You don't have their proxy. I responded, I don't need their proxies. I bought their shares and the voting rights are mine now. This confrontation was expected, so I gave her copies of the stock transfers, all notarized and approved unanimously by most of the stockholders at the meeting. Her lawyer snatched the papers, huffed, and said, "This is crazy. I'll tear you apart in court." It was all just a show for his client, and we both knew it. My sharp corporate secretary had the meeting minutes ready, and I enjoyed handing them to Elizabeth. I pointed out, "See here where the stock transfer got approved? Now I'm president and chairman of the board. And look behind you at the wall. There's the chairman's portraits, your granddad, your dad, and now me." Reality hit her hard. She couldn't handle the mansion payment, the car bills, country club fees, or even groceries. She never saved any of her dividends. Her stock was her savings, but no one would buy a 30% share with no dividends.
Jeff, I'll have your favorite steak dinner brought over from the country club. Will you join me? Let's talk and figure this out. I hope we can avoid a divorce, especially with the kids to think about, she said.
Sounds good. Let's say 6:30, I replied. It seemed she was really desperate now, bringing the boys into it. After all the crap she put me through, the affairs she had without a care, I was eager for this conversation. At 6:29, the doorbell rang, and Elizabeth answered the door looking all dolled up. Her makeup and hair were flawless, and she wore a silk dress that showed off her figure. Jeffrey, you didn't need to ring the doorbell. This is your home," she said. "I was just worried I might be interrupting something," I replied. "Oh, no interruption at all, Jeff. How about a glass of wine?" she offered. "Yes, please," I accepted politely. She got right down to business, saying, "You didn't exactly exceed my expectations at Miller Manufacturing, but you fast-tracked things by about 20 years. How did you manage to get my useless brothers to sell their stock to you?" It was a stroke of genius. "Now we control the whole company, just you and me. I've got some champagne chilling for a toast after dinner to celebrate this brilliant achievement." Elizabeth, it took a lot of hard work and being in the right place at the right time to pull it off. With you gone so much, I had plenty of time to focus. But just so we're clear, the reason the boys and I moved out is because I'm filing for divorce later this week. This won't be a shared company anymore. I have the majority stock and my decisions will be final. You can keep your stock and be on the board if you want, but we won't be paying out dividends for at least a year, I explained. "You can't do that, Jeff. That's my only income. How will I survive? How could you do this to your loving wife?" she protested. "My dear, you've been quite loving, though not to me," I responded. "Jeff, I may hang out with some guys, but I've stayed faithful to you. Just ask anyone in town," Elizabeth claimed. "Elizabeth, for the past year, I've had a private investigator tailing you at all your tennis events. You've got quite a following. His folder is filled with loads of photos and videos that prove your statement is false," I countered. Her face went pale. She needed a new angle. "If you're divorcing me, Jeff, you'll have to cough up alimony and child support. Staying married to me would be cheaper for you," she argued. With satisfaction, I replied, "Remember our post-nuptial agreement? Your lawyer made sure I wouldn't get a slice of your assets in case of divorce. You were shielding yourself from me, and now that shield protects me too. So no alimony. With your Miller Manufacturing stock valued at $6 million, the judge won't order alimony." She grinned, thinking she had a plan. "Perfect, just pay me the $6 million and I'll be on my way." I grinned back. "Sorry, babe, I don't need your stock to run the show. My 70% already beats your 30%. Your stock is practically worthless now. No dividends for you either. I'll vote myself a fat bonus if I need cash. The employees will get hefty bonuses before you see a dime. I'll turn this place into a top-notch modern manufacturing hub using the profits. And to get you out of my hair, I'll buy your stock for $100 grand. That's about what a minority stake in this company is worth." I continued. "You won't get any child support since the boys live with me. They're scared of you. I've been keeping track of the nights you've spent here. How can you be there for the boys when you're out of town most of the year? Plus, the PI has evidence of your cheating, photos and videos. And I've got DNA records from the man's material you brought home from your affairs. Once, there were samples from 3 different guys. You're a danger to the household, spreading STDs. The PI has names and can bring men to court to testify you're promiscuous. You won't get custody of the boys. Do you really want all that dirty laundry aired in court? I won't let you smear the Miller name. Why are you doing this to me, Jeff? I've loved you for years. Why? She pleaded. Why? I shot back. You slept with countless men after we got married. You disappeared for weeks without a word. You only cared about yourself. The boys and I meant nothing to you. Now you mean nothing to us. Goodbye, Elizabeth. I walked out the door, free and happy, a content father. Elizabeth couldn't make the next house or Mercedes payment. She tried selling the house, but it'll take months to sell unless she slashes the price. And she doesn't have much equity in it. People who served her said she packed her bags and left town. The house is heading to foreclosure and her car's getting repossessed. Meanwhile, I'm in control of a profitable company with $20 million in capital, and I'll never have to deal with her again. My PI made contacts in the tennis world while tailing Elizabeth. Word is she's in Vegas playing tennis without clothes. She and other women play, sometimes against paying customers. With her looks, she's the star of this live XXXSX show, a big hit in Vegas. Next, it's dancing at a sleazy club or working at a Vegas brothel once her tennis days are over.